How to read drum music. The first pattern here, you see two types of shapes. You see X's that are joined with a line, and you also see in the very lowest space a circle with a stick. And the way you read that is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then you repeat. This bar is a repeat, so you only do from there to there and you come back, so you do them all these all together as a repeat. But the way you read it is what I call the vertical rule. Vertical means from top and then you look down. So this is vertical and that's horizontal. So vertical is from top to bottom. So in this case you do everything you see here. You do the hat with the bass. And then this from top to bottom, there's a nothing, so it's a hat on its own. Just a hat. A hat. Hat bass. So a hat and a bass, a hat. Just all on its own. A hat on its own, a hat on its own. Then we can simplify it to bass, hat, 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 bass, hat, 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 and so forth. And this is how it sounds. First pattern. 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 4 and. The second pattern is there's two things that are the same. The hats are the same, and then the first space you got the bass drums. These are bass drums too. And the way that works is the same vertical rule. When you say 2 and 4, you got a snare drum. You got a snare drum there. That's 2, that's 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you can say simply we're doing three things here. We're doing hats with basses, that's one. Hats on their own, that's the thing on the left. Hat with a snare. And they're the three things we're doing. Sometimes a combination of them, and this is how it works. Hat bass, hat on its own. Hat snare, hat on its own. Hat bass, hat on its own. Hat snare, hat on its own. And we can simplify that as just being bass, hat, snare, hat, bass, hat, snare, hat. Second pattern. So the third pattern is with an extra bass drum here and a snare on 2 and 4, 1 and are hats with basses, 2 and 4 is with snare, 3 and is with hats with basses. So with hat for the bass, hat snare, hat on its own, hat bass, hat snare, hat on its own. And this is how it works. Third pattern. Fourth pattern is more of a combination of half of number 2 and half of number 3. See, there's just one bass there and then 2 basses there. So you just got the same hats. You got snare when you say 2 and 4, and you got a bass drum when you say 1, bass drum when you say 3 and. So from here you use the same vertical rule. So you're working from top to bottom. So we've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and hat bass, hat snare, hat bass, hat snare, hat bass, hat snare, hat bass, snare, hat. Vertical means from top to bottom. Follow the vertical rule. Fourth pattern. And the fifth pattern, if you know how to do the first two, you can do all 24 of these. 12 plus 12, 24 patterns. So the fifth pattern has a bass drum on 1, bass drum on 3, snare drum on 2, snare drum on 4, but the extra bass drum. Now when something is joined with a tail or a line, it's just quavers, as these are quavers, but still the vertical rule kicks in, it doesn't change. That's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and hat bass, hat, hat snare, bass, hat bass, hat, hat snare, hat, bass, hat, snare, bass, bass, hat, snare, hat. And that's the fifth pattern.
Fifth pattern.
And this is how the sixth works. It's the same thing, except have a look at what's different. Is there an extra bass drum there? There is. So when you say 1 and when you say 3, there's basses, but when you say 3 and, there's a bass. And when you say 2 and, there's a bass. So 3 bass drums in a row. Then snares, of course, on 2 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and hat bass, hat, hat snare, hat bass, hat bass, hat bass, hat snare, hat, bass, hat, snare, bass, 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 snare, hat. And this is how it works.
Sixth pattern.